whenever talking about Balanchine, we can talk about how he changed his world, his field, the approach. And for that, we can suggest that he was fascinated with music. He loved to reflect music. He loved to show us music. However, he knew he had to sell his ballads. So Nutcracker was something, of course, which the world does. So he did his Nutcracker. Beautiful, probably the best rendition of Nutcracker we will ever see. However, as time went by, he began to play with this idea of a full evening work. And he came up with this thought and idea that he would do a work that included 3 ballets in a package. And he called it Jewels. Okay, Jewels. So what he did was he provided us with an insight into French Romanticism. He gave us an insight into American neoclassicism, and of course into Russian, and his sense of what he felt about Russian music style. So that was 2. Then he decided he would do A Midsummer Night's Dream. And A Midsummer Night's Dream was not really part of my education. I went to a military college, so I didn't study that and knew nearly nothing about it. And as he started to choreograph this, he did it in little sections. And I was not cast in all of the sections. And so I just went to see when I was called. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And as time was going by, I was getting pretty bored, and bored to the point where I got underneath the piano and fell asleep. And, and then finally one day he said, okay, now you. And I was weaving it out, but it was, just a minute, and I'd have some mime, and this, that, and the other. And then he got to my variation. And the variation included a bunch of cans, about maybe 24 of them. And they were little butterflies in the forest. And I was Oberon, king of the forest. And so I didn't have much to learn other than a few moments of mime and things like that. And I just waited for the moment when I had to be Oberon, king of the fairies. So I waited, and finally he says, okay, we get to Oberon. And with my 24 little fairies, I have a major entrance the fairies are holding on to my cape as I'm walking in. And then finally, I'm in the middle of the fairies, and my variation starts. And the kids start dancing. And when they are done, they scatter and go away, and my variation starts. And that variation is probably one of the greatest male variations ever created. And again, Balanchine always choreographed to your abilities. So it was essentially for me. And I was thinking to myself as I was doing it, this is going to probably be around for a century or two, and dancers will be seeking to emulate what had been created for me. I thought, wow, that's, and for the most part, that's a distinctive area to be in. Her name is Nancy Reynolds, and the book is Repertory in Review, 40 Years of the New York City Ballet, with an introduction by Lincoln Kirstein, who was the founder of the New York City Ballet. And I naturally have to read you this. For the first original full-length ballet in American ballet, seemed to embrace all those elements he has so often scorned. Reading from this book, it says here, Villella as Oberon was considered outstanding. For some, he dominated. Great leaps with landings soft as snowflakes, and he breathed turns superbly controlled to each immaculate completion. He is challenging the Russian male dancers at their own terms. And he does not come off second. Had to speak about myself a little bit. Only because George Balanchine made me look my very best, as he did with every dancer. But it was a very interesting moment for me to think, oh my God, Balanchine ballets will be around a very long time. And I will always be the original Oberon. And that's a comfort. It's a comfort to go away with. It's a comfort for now, a man of 88, to look back and say, oh wow, it's still around. It'll still be here for a while. And I will have originated it. And that's a pride for me, truly a great pride. The work, therefore, for me, was basically the variation and who that character was, Oberon, king of the fairies, king of the forest. So it was wrapped around that. And that was the character. And it was the character. And as I read a little bit more about it, I'm not a tall man. And my Oberon had a tall lady. And in the original story, my Oberon was almost an elf. And my Titania was huge. So it was an interesting comment on his casting. My lady was Suzanne Farrell, who was a very tall lady, and so there was a definitive difference between us. But that also gave me a tremendous comfort that he was choreographing to who I was, and choreographing specifically for a person such as me to be an Oberon. So basically, for me to talk about this ballet is essentially to choreograph, to talk about what was choreographed around me. And that was, my variation was extended by these 24 kids. They started off, then they disappeared, and I did the first part of my variation. And that's how it continued until it ended with all of the kids back and me in the center.